Hello, everyone. Welcome to the contributors meeting. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Leo, and as usual, we're going to start with triage and discussion. We had Michael and Ishita this week. Michael, anything worth mentioning? I saw you added two topics here. You want me to click and open the issues?
Yeah, we can run through those real quick. I'll mention briefly 2.9.0 RC1 is out. Haven't seen anything particularly dramatic in terms of bugs on that. So y'all please run the RC internally and let us know if you hit trouble. On this one, let me remember what this is. Oh yeah, this is cool. So people who run Argo CD in a multi-architecture environment, so like they have pods running both ARM and AMD, they noticed that they'll get 404s in the UI when they request the UI bundle. And that's because sometimes they'll hit an ARM server. It'll give them the hash for the ARM version of the bundle. And then the request for that bundle will be handled by an AMD pod, which doesn't have the ARM version of the UI bundle. So one option folks have is to like pin, I think pin sessions. I forget exactly the mechanism, but basically make sure that the same API server handles all the requests for a given user. Another option is we could just make sure that the same bundle is produced for all images by removing the feature that shows on the download page what architecture the CLI download is for, and instead just direct them to the releases page to download the CLI for themselves. Yeah, I don't know. That didn't seem like a terrible idea to me. I don't know how attached people are to like showing the architecture in the UI for the CLI download, but that's one option.
One thing that came to my mind, I was digging into this, not specifically this issue, but something related to Intuit this week, and I found that there's a feature in Argo CD that automatically downloads the client, right? So the Argo CD client can be downloaded from from the web application that we serve. Maybe this is related to that. I'm not sure. But I'm just mentioning that because it could be something related to that specific feature.
It's slightly related. So we do offer the ability for a user to hit the API server and say, hey, send me the CLI. And the CLI that's sent is, of course, the one that's built for whatever architecture the image is. And that's fine. So like if like Intuit mostly runs AMD pods. So if I download the image, I can expect it to work on a Linux AMD machine. That's all fine. The problem happens when we want the UI to indicate to the user what architecture the image is running, because that requires a build time toggle in the Webpack bundler.
And when you say image, which image are you referring to? The API server?
Yeah, API server image, or just the Argo CD image. So we have build time Webpack logic that changes the bundle depending on the architecture.
If we just expose it in API response, like we can just get the data from API and just don't statically compile it into the bundle.
It is already, right? In the version endpoint?
Yeah, so maybe we just stop using statically compiled stuff in the bundle. And I'm proposing it because we run into the same problem and try to solve it with session stickiness. It seems to be working most of the time, but I guess it doesn't, like, there is no 100% guarantee that the very first request. So basically when user open the page for the first time, browsers send a bunch of requests in parallel, and sometimes we still get 404. So we kind of give up. So session syncing is possible, but not easy. So
Yeah, and we can tell them based on an API server response rather than a build time toggle.
exactly, yeah. Mhm.
That we might still be lying to them depending on how requests are being served. Because like if
Oh yeah,
if you're randomly picking a backend server, who knows which one's going to answer the API request versus the CLI request. But like we're lying to them now, so lying via this is not really that much worse.
we also have configurable versions, right? It's possible to volume mount files into image and configure. So I think if someone is running, Argo CD on mixed environment and want to make sure the user gets the same binary, those people can take the off-the-shelf image and then volume mount binaries with required architecture. And I think only caveat is it's impossible to replace kind of default API with the volume mounted binary. But if there was, yeah, so I guess my point is maybe default Argo CD installation should not even guarantee it. And the whoever is working on the setup, I think maybe we already provide tools that require to reliably serve the same binary, even if you have different nodes with different architecture.
Yeah. Okay, then so maybe what I'll recommend is let's get rid of the build time toggle, instead serve it up from the API, and then just people are still going to have the problem of like unexpected architectures on download in a mixed architecture environment, but they should still just do what's described in this issue, which is whatever pinning mechanism. Make sure you stay with the same architecture. Seem like reasonable first step anyway.
Yeah, I
agree.
I would also agree.
Cool. That's what I'll tell them.
All right, thanks, Michael. Next one, Argo City triggering resources deprecation warning in cloud providers.
Yeah, this one's maybe a little bit tougher. So AWS, GKS, I hope it's GKE. Anyway, Google and Amazon, they monitor requests for different resource kinds. If you're requesting a version that's up for deprecation, it'll show you warnings and potentially, I think, even block your upgrade. Folks are noticing that like there are kinds that they're not even using Argo CD for that are now blocking upgrades because Argo CD is watching everything. I pointed out resource exclusions. That's fine-ish, but maybe you don't want to exclude an entire resource just due to one version upgrade. And I also pointed like resource exclusions also don't work if you have a bunch of kinds and like have to constantly go back and add new exclusions. So all that to say, it would be dope if there was some way Argo CD could know, like I've never actually interacted with this kind. I've never seen a resource managed of this kind. I've never seen one in a resource tree of this kind, and just stop watching. But I don't know how difficult that would be to do.
Yeah, and did you have a POC that was trying to do that to ensure we don't watch everything that's on the cluster, but only watch limited things?
No, but
okay.
This problem is very familiar to us because OpenShift has like a similar thing, right? Like it warns you about deprecations and trigger the user warning for like, hey, you're going to upgrade to the next version, but you're using these deprecated APIs, right? But we are not using them, just the application controller is watching them. It is annoying, I agree.
But I'm curious how it blocks upgrades though. Like you have a controller which is trying to watch things. Sure, it shouldn't be watching it. It's probably annoying to see those things in the logs. It's probably distracting. But I'm wondering, how does it block upgrades?
I don't think it blocks them. It's just, you know, like if you run that cluster and get this warning and it says you, hey, you're using this, and so this confuses a lot of people, right? So because they would assume, oh wow, I'm using this deprecated thing, and oh no, not I'm using it, but the Argo CD application controller is using it. So, you know, the question everyone asks is, hey, will this block my update? You know, why is the Argo CD application controller using this API while it isn't using it, right? So, but it watches it. So, and if it's gone after the upgrade, Argo CD will forget about it, right? And so this is it's just an annoying thing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the watch doesn't specify the version. What specifies the version is what is provided in Git. So as far as I remember, the logic in Argo CD, it checks the API version defined in the desired state in Git, and asks the API server, the Cube API server, for that resource in that specific API version, and then it compares.
I think you're thinking of diff time. This is just watch time, building the cluster cache, which is constant. So Argo CD discovers all APIs and then watches all APIs.
Yeah, so right. Yeah, basically what happens is that the application controller will list all available APIs, right, during cluster cache buildup, and it discovers the pod security policy in the API group policy v1 beta 1 and watches it. So
which means this is a non-issue, right? Because when the cluster is upgraded, Argo CD will build the cluster cache again, and the version is not going to be there.
Right. It's not a real. It's, you know, it's not a bug per se. Like, it's not preventing. It doesn't affect any function. It's just annoying because it's exposed to the user if they have, like, you know, if they have these warnings, if they monitor them and the light goes on somewhere.
And when the API is removed, Argo stops watching it anyway because it's not listed.
Yeah, it's basically it's triggering a false positive. That's what it does. Like,
so one user said that GK prevented the upgrade, and they used the word prevent. I've asked them to clarify that, but that feels like a block to me.
Yeah, well, you already mentioned it, right? So you can teach the application controller to ignore this particular API, so you have to put it into the exclusion list, and then it won't watch that API anymore, and this particular warning is not issued anymore. And I would even say that this is not a complex workaround to implement, because these API deprecations, like, I think we've seen them for the, like, in the last 2 years. So Kubernetes deprecates 2 or 3 APIs per release, something like that. Maybe less for a particular release, maybe 4 or 5 for another release, but you don't have to carry this configuration around once the upgrade of the cluster is done, because then you can just remove those exclusions because the APIs don't exist anymore. So I'm not sure if we could programmatically solve this issue.
I think there are 2 things here. There is the problem of not allowing Argo CD to be updated in EKS and GKE clusters, and what the user is seeing as a warning in Argo CD logs. I'm not sure those 2 things are related. I know
that's what I feel as well. Yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah, so that's what I feel as well.
Okay.
They look like they're different things, but probably need a clarification there. Sorry, I just spoke for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, because this particular issue is the user is concerned about those warnings, right? But this is a false warning, as we already discussed. The thing about not allowing Argo CD to be updated in GKE AKS clusters, it might be something else. So I maybe would go in that direction with the user to really understand why EKS and GKE clusters are blocking. Maybe they're using a specific tool which analyzes logs. Maybe it's a possibility. But with the information that we have in this ticket, I'm not able to tell.
I do think there's potentially an interesting performance enhancement to be had, because suppose there are, 1,000 different kinds or API version kinds on a cluster, and Argo CD is watching all of them, but our manifests only ever touch 20 of them. And like the children resources of those 20 only ever touch 20 more. It would be interesting for Argo CD to kind of sleep the watches on all of the other types until we encounter a need to monitor it.
This sounds cool, but it sounds like a new feature entirely. Am I
And it
right?
sounds also very complex, to be honest.
Yeah.
I
Because
think
if
it's
you
complex because of the controller runtime.
it's
libraries,
also
right?
complex because you don't know, like take for example deployment. You will have a deployment in your Git, right? But that will result in a replica set and a pod that Argo CD basically don't know about because it's not in Git, right? So, and the same probably is true, like take for example an operator, right? You put the operand, so you have the operand, you don't know what this operand spawns, right? Like it could spawn config maps, it could spawn deployments, it could spawn, well, whatever, it could spawn some other custom CRs, right? Like,
Yeah. Owner refs flowing.
so it sounds very complex to go this route, like to build in this intelligence.
Yeah, if owner refs flowed in the other direction, it would be relatively easy. But since they flow from child resource to parent,
Yes,
you can't infer from the parent what you should be watching. That's fair.
but it's nonetheless it's a
Would be cool.
interesting idea. So it's just complex.
Yeah. Let me try to get a sense from the folks on this thread how like blocking it is. And then we can try to like identify the shortcomings of the resource exclusions and try to, find a little bit more usable way for folks to get past these messages or blockers or whatever. But I think this will be a conversation, not something that we can really solve on this call.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit more piece of information, Michael, and into it, I know platform folks are using some binaries to help identifying applications using deprecated API versions. Maybe the problem that IKS and GKE cluster are referring to are using those binaries, those applications. And it will be a matter of updating those applications. I'm trying to remember exactly how the application works, the one used by Intuit, but I'm failing to remember. So it could be something related to that.
Yeah, I do think that in the case of GKE, it is a built-in feature because I'm looking at a screenshot and it's very, very googly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But maybe for other folks, it's a third-party tool.
Okay. Anything else for this one?
Nope, that's it, and that's all the issue triage stuff I have.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael.
I have another issue for triage that isn't on the list. Sorry. Probably a quick one. Let me paste it into the chat. I'll find it. It's a pity that Alex just left because I would love his opinion on that. So this is about the sync retries. And basically, if you have auto sync enabled and you have the sync retries on, it's a rather old issue, but I just stumbled over it because there was some recent discussion. And this behavior annoyed me as well. So what happens is that when you have an error in your source, the retry will never succeed because it won't take into account any new commit to Git. So I think if when the retry feature was developed, it was like assuming that you have a CR in your application and the CRD does not exist. It will be installed by another application, for example. So so the retry feature really takes only changes on the live state into account to recover, and not changes in the source. So I agree that this is a very annoying issue. And I took a look at the code, and I even came up with a very simple fix to it. But yeah, it would change the default behavior, right? So I was thinking that maybe a new toggle in the retry stanza would be good, but that would be a CRD change and would prevent us from cherry picking into previous releases, right? So yeah, but yeah, Alex is unfortunately gone because I'm not sure what kind of side effects this change would have. So but I just wanted to see from people in the community, like, is that a bug?
PR, Jan.
Sorry?
I don't see a PR on the issue.
No, I don't have submitted a PR.
You have a proposal.
I just fixed it right before this meeting because I have it locally in my in a development branch. It's really just 2 lines of code.
Well, the changing behavior.
Differently.
Yes, go ahead.
What does it do? What's the change?
Oh, the change just resets. So if you look into the application status, there is a sync state field, and it keeps the commit SHA that should be synced against. So the retry never, it will use the very same commit SHA for all retries, and that's why it doesn't take any changes that are committed to Git, like to fix an issue into account. And the change just resets the commit SHA, so the next retry will perform a refresh of the application. So like, look at if there is a new commit SHA, and if there is, render the manifest and set the sync commit SHA to that value. That's the change.
I'm pretty sure, Jan, that this is the expected behavior by many users on this retry logic. So that sounds a pretty good feature to add. But as we're changing the existing behavior, my suggestion would be just to add this as behind a flag or a configuration to make Argo City behave this way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe just a Boolean that says refresh true false or something like that. But yeah, so that basically would only be a forward fix, right? So we'd not be able to cherry pick it back into the support releases.
The only
CRD change.
Yeah, the only downstream effect I would want to double check is in the sync history, it would still show failed sync. It wouldn't show successful sync off of that previous SHA.
I don't think it would record. I don't think that the retries are record it, right? It will record the sync if either a retry limit is reached and the sync fails eventually, or if the error condition has been fixed and then the sync succeeded. That's what I think.
There's like a status if you interrupt a rollout, isn't there? Like if you start a change and then you make a new commit before that change is able to complete rolling out, it man, I'm thinking of maybe rollouts that does this, that shows up as like an interrupted state or something, and then it just pushes forward, because it doesn't seem like it should update an existing sync that's on a retry. It seems like it should terminate that sync and then start the new one, right? Because if you have, like, if it gets stuck and it's on a retry, it's not going to redo pre-sync hooks, right? But like if you're rolling to a new commit SHA, you may have pre-sync hooks that you want to operate. So shouldn't it not update the sync that it's on and retry? It should terminate that sync and then let the new one start. Do I have this mixed up?
I'm not sure, but it's pretty. I think it's something we can investigate, because I think that the sync usually fails before, like the sync already usually fails in a dry run phase, right? Like, but
Is it true that the retry won't execute pre-sync hooks on whenever it tries to sync again? I never tested this scenario. So I try to sync, something failed. My application was configured with a pre-sync hook and retry. Will the pre-sync hooks always be executed or not? That's the scenario you're referring
Yeah.
to, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a valid use case to make sure.
yeah, it probably really depends on where the sync fails, right? If it's failing in the dry run phase, like you have a missing CRD in the cluster, or you have a wrong YAML, then probably the pre-sync hooks are not executed because the sync is not really running, right? It's just in the pre-sync, in the dry run phase. But if you have like something like a admission webhook that would fail to admit the resource during the hot phase of the sync, right?
Yeah.
Then probably, yeah, that's at least, need to make sure. Probably need to investigate this. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And then if you add this additional configuration, where you think this should be added, Jan, in the application resource?
Yes, that it would be part of the retry spec, right? Like
Right.
you have, like in the sync policy, you have like this retry field where you
Right.
specify the number of allowed retries, and there would probably live this kind of
Right.
setting.
Makes sense. Sounds good. Yeah, I was just thinking if we want to have that go globally applied in the controller as well. But I mean, we can discuss that
Yeah.
in the PR. Cool. Thanks, Jan. Anything else you want to add to this?
Not really. There is a related issue, but think we can discuss this offline. So.
All right. Thanks, Jan. I'm gonna add this to the doc. So we history, and yeah, that wraps up the triage and discussion. We need to elect the next person that will be doing triage next week. Any volunteers in the call?
I can take next week.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any volunteers for secondary?
Leo, I can take the secondary.
All right, thanks, Ashutosh. Okay. Any topics for discussion someone wants to bring up last minute?
EDE tests, they've been flaky lately. Thanks to Leo and Zach for pointing out some ways to mitigate that. Boiled down to independently running EDE tests so that if one flakes, it doesn't kill all of them. And second, introducing some per test retry logic. Long story short, you should see fewer failures. It was getting pretty bad, like 75% flaking out. So hopefully things will be better starting after we merge one more PR, one more CI PR, which should happen any minute.
Right, and this just to make sure, Michael, this is true for EDE tests, right?
Actually, it was easier just to do it for EDE and unit tests. So went ahead and
It will
put
retry
retries
for
in
both.
both. Yep.
Okay, and then it will fail after how many attempts?
Bumped it out to 60 minutes instead of the current 45 minutes limit for EDE tests, since retries could push the time further. I mean, obviously we're kind of kicking the can down the road on these flakes, but I just don't have the time right now to properly fix any tests. So kicking the can it is.
Yeah, I was yeah, I just wanted to bring it up that maybe we should enable this for E2E, but not for unit tests. And unit tests, if those fail, it should fail the build, and the test should be fixed.
Since they're relatively unflaky.
Yeah, so unit tests are not expected to be flaky, and if they are, I think it's we're better served with just commenting the test out and removing it from our suite of tests, instead of retrying and kind of hiding it. Yeah, in case we have a unit test that is failing for a real issue, that is going to be retrying forever until it reaches a timeout. Is that correct?
The test should retry up to 5 times. It's configurable. So what I can do is for unit tests, I'll just configure it to 0 retries.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea.
Cool. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and it was great to bring it up because it changes a little bit how E2E tests are going to be executing in the build. It's good that everybody is aware. Great, thanks everybody. Any other topics someone wants to discuss? All right, so I guess that wraps up for today. I meet you next week. Thanks everybody.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye all.